The US dollar reset is starting, and I know this for a fact because there are a few things that happen before every reset in history, and they're happening right now. So today I'm going to show you the signs that marked every reset for the last 300 years. And guys, this isn't a doom and gloom video because the people who spotted these signs early throughout history got very wealthy off the back of it. And in the end, I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm doing with my own money. If you don't know me, my name's Nick. I've been a professional investor and unprofessional trader for 25 years. I'm not a financial advisor, and this is not an inducement to buy or sell any assets. And as always, do not take financial advice from some random dude on YouTube. Right, so let's get into it. First things first, the US dollar is known as the global reserve currency. But what actually is a global reserve currency? Because they never really teach us this in school. And it's really important that you understand this. So it's the money that the whole world settles up in. A factory in Vietnam sells shoes to a shop in Chile, and neither of them wants the other guy's currency. So that deal happens in dollars. Oil, copper, wheat, all of it is priced in dollars. Close to 90% of all currency trades on earth have the dollar on one side of them. And every central bank keeps a big pile of dollars in their vault for a rainy day. That's the reserves bit, right? Now, think about what this means for America. Everyone on the planet has to earn their dollars. They have to make something, sell it, and earn their dollars. America can just print them. The French actually call this the exorbitant privilege, and they aren't wrong, really. But there's a bit that almost nobody knows, and it's the whole reason for this video. The dollar is not the first currency to hold this crown. It's roughly the sixth. Portugal had it, then Spain, then the Dutch, then the French, and then eventually Britain, and now America. On average, the crown changes heads about once a century, and every empire that's held it was completely certain that their money was forever. I mean, you gotta love history, how it rhymes. So let me tell you how it actually ends, because the story does rhyme every single time. So let's get into it. Let me take you back to Amsterdam in the 1700s. The Dutch guilder was the world's money back then. The whole world ran on it. And this video isn't going to be a boring history lesson, by the way. It's just every one of these stories will teach us something about the current situation we're in. So back then, the Bank of Amsterdam was basically the world's vault. Merchants from every country on earth kept their money there because the bank had one sacred rule. It never touched your deposits. And for over 100 years, that rule held. Then the Dutch fought a string of wars they couldn't afford, and the government leaned on the bank. So the bank started lending out the deposits that it swore it never touched, mostly to the Dutch East India Company, which was busy going broke, by the way. And nobody announced any of this, obviously. The bank just kept publishing reassurances while the vault emptied out. Then another war with Britain drained the country, word got out about this lending, and the merchants did what merchants always do. They moved their money to London. They moved their money somewhere else. So by the 1790s, the Bank of Amsterdam was finished. It was done. And the guilder was done along with it as the world's money. The people who moved early, they were fine. The people who got out early, they were fine. But the people who didn't, they got stuck holding their bag. So everyone who believed in the bank's reassurances essentially got wiped out. And remember that move, because every government in this story does the same thing. And it's just a reminder that you never trust bankers or the government. They are not your friends. But the Dutch was a long time ago, right? Let's talk about the pound, which is a bit more recent. This was in 1913. The pound sterling, it was the king, and it wasn't even close. London financed the entire planet's trade. The pound was backed by the largest empire in human history, a quarter of the world's land and people. If you stood in London in 1913 and said that the pound was going to lose its spot, they would have laughed you out of the room or out of the city, I guess. It'd be like standing in New York today and saying that the dollar is finished, or you know, making YouTube videos about it. Then Britain fought 2 world wars, and the wars ran on borrowed money. By 1945, Britain's debt was roughly 250% of GDP, and the country that used to lend to the whole planet was begging America for loans. And a few things happened along the way. For example, in 1931, Britain got forced off of the gold standard. They called it temporary, but it wasn't. And 40 years later, America used the exact same words for the exact same move. They got forced off the gold standard, and they said it was temporary. 55 years later, they're still not back on the gold standard. Now here's where it gets properly dark, because Britain had no honest way to pay off the debt. So they did 3 things. And I want you to remember all 3 of these things because they're really important. I want you to burn these things into your mind because they're going to have a direct impact on your portfolio in coming years if the US dollar follows the same path, which I believe it will. And look, this is probably one of the greatest scams in the history of finance. Here it is step by step. So first, they trapped everyone in the pound. Countries across the empire, India, Egypt, dozens more, held massive piles of pound sterling and they were pressured to keep holding. Ordinary Brits got capital controls. At one point, you were allowed to take only £50 out of the country on holiday. So you couldn't even get your money out, even if you saw this whole thing coming. Second, they pinned interest rates below inflation on purpose for decades. So your savings earned 2% while prices rose way faster than that. So every year, a slice of your wealth went straight to the government. It was like a stealth tax. And nobody ever voted on this, by the way. It was just the way they did things. Economists called it financial repression, which is a very polite name for it, really, but it's a massive scam. That's what it is. And third, they lied. In 1949, the Chancellor stood up and denied any plan to devalue the pound over and over in public. Then one Sunday evening in September, he devalued it by 30% overnight. I shouldn't laugh because it's horrible. It's horrible what the government does. But people went to bed with a pound worth like $4 and they woke up with a pound worth $2.80 US. In 1967, they did it again. Prime Minister Harold Wilson at the time went on TV and told the nation, and I quote, he said this, "The pound in your pocket has not been devalued." The pound had literally just been devalued 14% a few days earlier. It's like one of the most famous lies in British history, financial history anyway. So people say that the US is not Britain, but back then people said that Britain is not like France and they would never devalue their currency. And when France did it, they said that France wasn't like Holland, and when Holland did it, they said Holland wasn't like Spain, so on and so forth throughout history. Anyway, let me finish this story about Britain's reset. So there was one moment where the whole world saw the truth all at once. In 1956, Suez, right? Britain invaded Egypt like the superpower it thought it still was, but it wasn't anymore. And there was a run on the pound, and Britain needed dollars to defend it. America said, no, not until you pull your troops out. And Britain packed up and went home in weeks, like a naughty little kid outside the headmaster's office, because whoever holds the world's money is who gives the orders. But there's one thing people didn't know in the 1950s. The crown had already moved over to the United States because the dollar had already overtaken the pound in central bank reserves back in the 1920s. So technically the handover happened decades before Suez and nobody announced it. The world just found out later when the US pulled its power move. It's crazy how fast things change, by the way. At its peak, the sterling made up over 70% of global reserves. By 1975, it was under 5%. A pound saved in the 1950s had lost around 90% of its buying power by the 1980s. So the signs were all there, just almost nobody acted on them. Oh, and as a side note, by the way, in the mid-2000s, the US dollar was 70% of global reserves. Now it's 50% and falling quite fast. So, make of that what you will. So let's check in on the US, because before a reserve currency loses its spot, the same four things happen, and they show up roughly in the same order every time. Sign number one, the debt becomes unpayable. So the Dutch had their wars, Britain had its two world wars, America has $39.7 trillion of debt right now, and the interest alone on that debt is $1 trillion per year. That's more than America spends on its entire military, and the debt pile is now bigger than the entire US economy's yearly output. No country has ever run numbers like that and stayed on top. Sign number two, they say the right words while doing the complete opposite. I mean, Britain's chancellor swore that they'd never devalue right up until they did. Now listen to Washington. What are they saying? Every Treasury Secretary for the last 30 years has recited, "We believe in a strong dollar." Meanwhile, Trump says openly on camera that he wants a weaker dollar for exports. He's the first president in history who doesn't even pretend. And last week, Kevin Warsh, the new Fed chair, just stood up at a forum in Portugal and promised the world that inflation is going back to 2%. I mean, the Fed's own forecast says 3.6% this year, right? The official number right now is 4.2% on inflation. And anyone who's done a shop lately, a food shop, will tell you that the official number is probably bullshit. So the words they're saying are 2% and stability, and the math says that your dollar is losing at least 4% per year. When the words and the actions split up like that, believe the actions. Right? That's sign number two. Sign number three, they trap people into holding a dying currency. This is the one where I need you to pay close attention, because the modern version is clever. Britain did it with those sterling balances I talked about and that 50-pound rule on holiday. America just did it with a law that most people never heard of. It's called the Genius Act. It passed in July of last year, and it regulates stablecoins, the digital dollars in crypto. Stablecoins are like digital. It doesn't matter. I'll explain them in a sec. So the law says every every regulated stablecoin must be backed by US government debt. If you issue a digital dollar, you're buying treasuries, no choice. You have to back it with government debt. So Washington just built itself a captive buyout for its own debt, one that legally can't say no. They have to buy US debt if they want to exist. It's pretty clever, really. Now, what's the value of these stablecoins? How much debt are they actually going to buy? So Tether, that's one single crypto company, now holds roughly $140 billion of US government debt. That makes it something like the 17th biggest holder on the planet, bigger than most actual countries. But that's only $140 billion, right? It's almost nothing in the grand scheme of things. Well, how about this? A couple of weeks ago, 140 of the biggest companies on earth, so that's Visa, MasterCard, BlackRock, Google, announced that they are launching one shared digital dollar together. It's called OpenUSD, a stablecoin created by the most evil companies in the world, allegedly. And it's backed by US debt, which is probably quickly going to eat up trillions of US debt when the thing gets going. Now, here's my favorite part of this entire scam. And when I say favorite, I mean, if you're an evil psychopath trying to squeeze already broke people for just a few more cents each, under the law, they are banned from paying you interest if you hold these stable coins. So you hand over your dollars, you buy stable coins, and they buy government debt with those stable coins, and they keep the interest. I mean, you're holding just some magical bullshit internet money token and they pay you nothing. It's a crazy good business model for them. You thought banks were evil. At least a bank pays you interest when you put a dollar in the bank. I mean, it's a pittance, but at least it pays you more than zero. But stablecoins, they're paying you zero. And on top of that, just like Britain did, they hold rates near or below real inflation. So cash savers, people with money in the bank, they eat the loss year after year because their currency, their money slowly gets debased. Okay, on to sign number 4. The rest of the world just quietly moves away first. So before Nixon closed the gold window in 1971, when he ended the gold standard, foreign governments had spent years swapping their dollars for gold and shipping it home. They saw it coming and they moved before any announcement was made. Now look at today. The dollar share of global reserves has fallen from 72% in 2001 to around 57, 56% now. Central banks have been net buyers of gold for 16 years straight, over 1,000 tons last year alone. These are the people who print money, swapping their own product for metal as fast as they can, without spooking anyone, right? They're trying not to scare people, but that's what they're doing. And for the first time since 1996, foreign central banks now hold more of their reserves in gold than in US treasuries. That flip got barely any coverage, which tells you how early we still are to this whole thing. But also another thing, China's US debt pile is under 700 billion. I think it's actually closer to 600 billion right now. It's the lowest since 2008. Saudi Arabia has started taking yuan for some of its oil now. India pays in rupees, and countries keep flying their gold home out of New York. So countries are removing their gold from New York. And no one's holding a press conference about this. And that's the point. In the 1920s, the reserve flip from pounds to dollars didn't get a press conference either. Like I said, people found out about it in the 1950s. That's when people really realized what had happened. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now. Nick, what's the dollar getting replaced by? The yuan? China has capital controls, you can't get your money out of it, and nobody on earth trusts the Communist Party with their life savings. The euro? I mean, the Eurozone can barely hold its own members together, right? The pound, we're not going back there because that's a bloody mess and that country's falling apart, which means you're right. There's no successor currency standing there right now the way the dollar stood there in 1945 or 1950, whenever it kind of officially transferred over from the pound to the dollar. But hold on, because that's exactly what makes this one even scarier. When the pound died, the world had somewhere to run to. You could swap one paper for a better piece of paper and you just get on with your life. This time, there's no better paper on offer. So instead of one big switch to a new currency, the world is quietly spreading out of the dollar system altogether into local trade deals, into neutral reserves, into real assets like gold and silver. And that's what Sign 4 was actually showing you. The people who run the system aren't waiting for a replacement to get announced. They're just making sure less and less of their wealth depends on one country's promises, the US. And if everything you have sits in US dollars, you're the one left holding the bag. So, right, let me be straight with you now, though, because I'm not here to sell you a fairy tale. These handovers take decades. I mean, the pound peaked before 1914, and it didn't hit its floor until the 1970s. That's like a 40 or 50 year story with huge rallies inside and out of it. So the dollar could stay the top dog for another 10 or 20 years, exactly because there's no ready replacement. Or it could happen a lot faster. I mean, it's already been 25 years since the dollar peaked in, 2001-ish. So there's no set time limit for these things. And all along the way, you're always going to get stretches like right now, where the dollar is at 1-year highs and every headline says the dollar is back. But it's not about any 1 month or 1 year. It's about the long-term trend. And that is the point to really think about. If the long-term trend is down and you don't want to just sit around trying to guess when it happens, how do you handle it? So the question is, how have I actually positioned for this? And this doesn't mean this is how you should position for it. I'm just going to give you my ideas and then you talk to a financial advisor or whatever. But it's nothing too dramatic. And that's the entire point. It's simple. I've just diversified my portfolio a little bit. Instead of being all in on US indexes and stocks, I sold them and increased my exposure globally, which, by the way, a lot of billionaires are also doing right now, which should give you a clue of what's happening around the world. I sold SPX and got into the Polish version of SPX, which is the WIG, the WIG. It's their version of the SPX. People laughed and said I was dumb when I made that move. Now SPX is up 10% in 2026 and the WIG is up like 20%. Also World X US. That's an index made up of many, many countries, including emerging economies, but it excludes the US. So that's why it's called World X, excluding US. It's an ETF, check it out. Also metals, in a dollar debasement scenario, gold wins. I still hold US stocks, but I've lowered my exposure to US stocks and increased my exposure globally, increased my exposure to metals like gold and silver, because like I said, there is not a replacement yet for the US dollar, and money is rebalancing globally, which means I'm also rebalancing globally. I'll see you in the next one.